Hi friends, Robert here for Diverse Opals. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. Thank you for your comments, thank you for subscribing. I hope that you'll continue to join with us on our tutorials on the diversity of opal. Here before you today is a piece of pipe opal, commonly called pipe opal or wood replacement opal from Queensland. We can see there is this material is actually quite pretty. You can often see quite bright flecks. I don't know if you can see it in your screen, but as we look at this type of material, we can often see bright little flashes of colour that exist at different points on the outside of the stone. But you can see it across here, hopefully. But I've had this looked at by people who are a bit knowledgeable in this field at a more technical side, and they tell me that this is the result of grass or seeds being trapped in the rock at some particular time and becoming opalized. I have had the joy of being able to cut very nice pipe out of this type of material, and you never know exactly what you're getting. I'm just going to grab another piece and bring that in, and this piece is a bit the same. This one has a slightly different colour, but you can see the colour. It is quite beautiful, it is quite pretty, and I've experimented with different ways of being able to use this in jewellery. Now, this project started with a larger piece, and this larger piece exhibited some colour on one end. And once again, I was hopeful that I would see this eventuate into a pipe. So I cautiously took my time and started making cuts from the outside, and I took one cut, nothing really much to see, because you can never predict which way these pipes will run. There's no indication of where this will go. So I made a couple of cuts on this end because we have the pipe here. Well, I thought it was a pipe here, and so I made cuts this end, and you can see beautiful colour on this side here. And there's no real indication of where this comes from or where it's going to. So I considered that's not attached to this, so I made more cuts, and I could see some quite beautiful colour either side. And I kept going, working my way in to where I considered the pipe would be, and ended up with more material. Well, ultimately I worked my way to the middle piece without the success that I'd hoped for. But along the way I found some pretty opal in the middle, and as you can see, that's what I was hoping for. But disappointingly, it didn't eventuate into what I'd considered to be a long pipe. And this is a real conglomerate of, as I said, it could be grass, it could be seeds, it could be twigs that have opalized over a period of time. But what I want to show to you today is how we can use this, and we'll talk about sanding. To me, sanding is one of the most important aspects of processing opal or processing stone. And sanding can be done with diamond, it can be done with silicon carbide, it can be done flat, it can be done with a belt or a band, drum sanders. I'm using predominantly flat surfaces. And so what we'll do now is we'll have a look at the types of machinery or the types of equipment that we could potentially use for sanding. And then we'll go through some sanding processes, or a sanding process. I'm not going to be polishing this. The reason being is that because of the sandy nature or granular nature of the surface of this, it's going to drag across the surface of the stone. It will contaminate my buff to some degree because of the sandy nature of it. And what ends up happening in this particular case is that it produces fine lines across your opal. It drags. So as the buff is actually working across the surface of this, it actually drags granular material across the surface of your opal and leaves fine lines. So you don't really get that type of result that you're looking for. You'll get that on harder materials such as boulder, hard boulder, but you may struggle to get that result because of the sanding nature. And I will finish this with a fine sandpaper. So let's have a look at types of equipment we could potentially use, or you could potentially use to make up a sander. This is one of the types of units you can make up for sanding. This is a CMG, a single phase motor. Most motors that you can get are 1440, but this particular one does 2850 RPM. So it's the sort of speed that I like to use when I'm doing sanding. Yes, you'll see some tape on here. That's only just to keep this on here and keep it clean because I don't normally use it. It's a backup for when my dental lathe isn't actually in order. So I like to be prepared. I don't like to be without my sander. You can see from this, it's a motor with a 1/2 inch shaft. You can see here that an aluminium disc has been made up with two holes in here to actually fasten it onto the shaft. If that's the way you want to do it, that's probably the easiest way of being able to do it. The disc is a 4.5 inch disc, 4.5 inch aluminium disc, that will allow you to be able to cut, say, 4 sheets out of an 11 by 9 sheet. And if I just plug this in, you'll be able to see how quiet this unit is. It is fairly quiet, and I like that about my machines. If you're going to be using something like this for a long period of time, you don't want to be putting up with a lot of noise. So this is an option for you if you've got access to a junkyard, a salvage yard. You can find yourself a motor that does about 3000 RPM. I would encourage you to go that way. So it's a cheap way of being able to make it because dental lathes are quite expensive. So I'll show you another machine in a moment. Let's do that. This is the other machine I wanted to show you, and it's basically an adaptation of a normal grinder, a normal bench grinder. This one is actually quite an old one, and the previous owner had made it up to take the 6-inch discs. To me, it's a bit of a waste of material, especially if you're using a standard 11 by 9 sheet. You don't always get a lot of value for money that way, but I've kept this as a backup for my sanding processes because, as I said, sanding is very, very important. Once again, it's a fairly quiet machine. You can do this. You can go to your local hardware and get yourself a grinder. Take the guards off it. You've just got to go to an engineer shop, and you can see this one's the same. Grub screws at either end that actually hold the discs in place, and you can do your sanding in this particular way. But I like dry sanding, but just keep in mind of the dust problems that you will encounter. It's important that you wear a mask or you have some sort of ventilation to make sure that you're not breathing in the dust. So what I'll do now is we'll have just a brief talk about the type of the type of adhesive that I'm using to actually hold the paper on the discs. You might be a bit amused. I've got a few cans of disc cement. I have spoken about disc cement in other videos. These are all Norton, and Norton was the standard that most opal cutters used for their sandpaper. You can still buy this, but it's becoming harder to find. And probably the places that you might find, sorry, let me say this, Norton is no longer available, okay? There are some other brands in the marketplace, but you're going to have to look probably at a crash repair store, although the people in the crash repair industry are converting over to hook systems or Velcro back systems, but maybe there are still some people using this. So you can still buy it. Problem is, shipping it is the problem. It's highly flammable, and the postal services don't like handling flammable products. You can buy this. You can buy what they call pressure-sensitive adhesive in a spray as well. But I still continue to use this. I still have this. It's important to keep these lids shut. If you don't keep it shut properly, they will dry out. And once it gets dried out, it's very hard. Well, you end up throwing it away. But if you have some and it's thickening up, I suggest that you get some Shell Light. It was the original lighter fluid that people used to put in the old lighters, and you can put that in this, and it'll actually help the hydrocarbon to become more liquid. So that's a suggestion for you. But I still use this. This is an important part of my sanding process. So what we'll do now is we'll have a look at one of the pieces that we're going to sand up of the pipe opal, or the wood replacement opal. We've selected the piece that we're going to work with. It's nothing special, but it has some nice colour. And what I've done is I've marked out, you can see here, a pencil mark here, and one across here. So this will end up essentially as a square stone. I will go to the saw, which I don't need to show you the sawing process, but then we'll come back and go directly to the sander and start the sanding process. So we'll go to the saw, but then we'll come back to the sander. We talked about disc cement, and now I'm just going to show you the processes for actually applying it. The disc should be evenly coated, and I'm using a small meat skewer dop stick that I've used. As you can see, it's like an amber colour, and I just insert the stick into the disc cement, just wipe it off a little bit. I don't want to use a great deal, and then I just apply it to the surface, turning it. So I'm going to need a little bit more. Just take it all the way out to the rim and into the centre, and that's basically the process of putting this on. I keep mine in a little tube so it doesn't collect a lot of dust. And as I said previously, make sure that your disc cement is securely sealed up, because if it dries out, it's really not much good for anything. Now, we're going to start with, I'm using this is a dental lathe. As I said, I have other machines as backups in case this one dies. This one's been quite faithful to me for quite a number of years, probably maybe 20 years. But I'm going to start the process with 240 grit. I like to use Matador paper. I think it's one of the best papers I've ever encountered, but make sure it's positioned centrally. Yeah, let's just get this underway. Make sure you're wearing a mask, or if you've got a dust extractor, you can use both. So because we're actually to the coarser grade now, I'm just going to square this up a little bit more to make it look a little bit more presentable. Because this is fairly soft material, it comes off quite quickly. Just make sure you've got a good grip of the stone when you're working the full surface of the stone. It can get out of your grip quite quickly, but we can see that the surface of the stone is becoming a lot finer as a result of the 240 grit. I think all of our saw marks are out of the surface now, and we'll just move on to the next grade, which will be a 400. We'll stop the machine and we'll go to a 400 now. As I've said previously in other videos, that this surface here does load up very quickly with silica and whatever the material is that you're working with, and you can salvage this to some degree. You can actually get a little bit more life out of it purely by cleaning it with some water, like a tissue or a towel. You just spray some water on the towel and drag it across the surface of the stone, the surface of the pad or disc while it's actually running. So here we are, we're now on to 400. Starting to look better all the time. Because the grades are getting finer, or as the grades are getting finer, the stone is producing more surface contact, which means the stone is actually getting hotter faster. So you will notice this. The stone will get quite hot after a while because there's more and more contact with the surface. But I'm happy with the way things are turning out. It's looking good. I just trim up around the outside again. Try to even your fingers out across the surface of the stone to get good coverage. So as you're grabbing, try to place your fingers, if you're doing this type of work like that. It's not always easy to dop stones, so with stones that are this big, try to become accustomed to actually holding them in your hands. Of course, you may lose a few fingernails along the way, but that's part and parcel of the learning process. Starting to look quite pretty now. You can see the light when you're looking at the surface of the stone. You can see the light reflection. I'm always looking at the reflection of the light that comes from this into the surface back to my eyes to see where the scratch marks are. I'm going to go to the next grade, which will be a 1200. I'm just going to, we can see that the surface of this is getting quite loaded, still taking material off. But so now we'll move on to a 1200. Really starting to look quite almost like a finished stone. Although I'm advocating the use of this particular brand of paper, which is Starcke Matador, there are also very good brands out there, and I would encourage you to seek them out because your final result will depend on well-graded paper. So keep that in mind. Well, here we are. This is the final result. The last time you saw the stone was straight off the sander, and it would have had a slightly paler look about it, slightly lighter look. It sort of has a slightly richer look about it now, and that's primarily due to the fact that I've put it into the ultrasonic cleaner to knock out all of the loose particles of dust. I always encourage people to do that, especially if they've been polishing with tin oxide or any type of polish for that matter, because the particles of dust or dirt or the polishing compound itself get trapped in the little pores, and they take away that richness of the stone. So that's what we've done, is we've put it in the ultrasonic cleaner, and I think it looks quite a bit different. It looks quite interesting. It's got some very nice features on the stone, and we're finished. This is a final result, and it was primarily a tutorial about how to use your sander, but in the process we were actually exhibiting some pipe opal as well. So I hope that this has been of interest to you or help to you in your sanding process, and maybe you've learnt something about wood replacement opal. I hope this has helped you, and we encourage you to leave comments if you like, and we will try to continue to provide informative videos relating to Opal in the future. So continue to subscribe, or if you're not sure, leave a comment, ask a question. They are most welcome. I'm Robert for Diverse Opals. Thank you for watching.